The morning Thomas Hart died, his coffee mug was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Half full, cold, forgotten. I stared at it longer than I should have, as if it might explain how a life built over decades could vanish in a single night. We had been married for 23 years, long enough to believe in permanence, long enough to trust promises, long enough to think love meant protection. My name is Eleanor Hart. I was 62 years old when I learned how quickly a wife can become invisible. 3 days after Thomas was buried, while the scent of flowers from the funeral still clung to the curtains, his sons arrived. Ryan and Lucas did not call ahead. They did not knock politely. They walked in as if the house already belonged to them, their footsteps confident, measured, rehearsed. They did not look around for memories. They went straight to Thomas's home office, the room where he used to read the paper every morning, where he once held my trembling hand and admitted he was afraid of getting sick. Ryan was the older one, tall, sharp suit, the kind of man who spoke as though resistance was inconvenient. Lucas stood beside him, quieter, eyes constantly scanning, calculating. Neither of them looked like men who had lost their father. They looked like men finalizing a deal. "Eleanor," Ryan said, my name delivered with professional distance. "We need to discuss the estate." The word estate struck harder than any condolence. Thomas had barely been laid to rest, and already his life was being reduced to assets and signatures. Lucas added gently, "We know this is difficult, but there are legal matters that need immediate attention." I looked at them standing in that office, breathing the air of a house they had never maintained. They were not here during the long hospital nights. They did not hear the doctor's whisper. They did not hold Thomas's hand when he confessed his fear of dying. "What legal matters?" I asked. Ryan opened a folder and placed it on Thomas's desk, like a judge delivering a verdict. Inside were documents stamped, signed, and heavy with authority. "According to Dad's will," Ryan said, "the primary residence, the lake property, and the business assets go to Lucas and me." My heart stuttered. The house, our home, the place where we built a life together. "And me?" I asked quietly. Lucas shifted. "There is a life insurance policy, $200,000. $200,000. It sounded substantial until I understood what I was losing. Ryan leaned casually against Thomas's desk. "The house alone is worth close to $900,000. The lake place is around $700,000. The business generates steady income. Dad wanted everything to stay in the family." "The family?" I nodded slowly. "Where am I supposed to live?" "You'll have 30 days, Ryan replied without hesitation. "That should be sufficient." 30 days to dismantle 23 years of memories. 30 days to grieve and relocate my entire life. Lucas spoke again, softer but sharper. "Dad believed blood matters when it comes to legacy." Blood. As if loyalty, sacrifice, and love were meaningless currencies. I remembered Thomas calling me his anchor, and now I was being untied and set adrift. "There's more," Ryan said, his tone shifting. "During Dad's illness, there were medical expenses. Insurance covered most of it, but about $180,000 remains." My chest tightened. "Those bills," Lucas said, "are legally your responsibility." I stared at them. "So you take the houses, you take the company, and I take the debt." "That's how the will is written," Ryan said calmly. I looked around the office one last time. The shelves, the window, the framed photo of Thomas and me on our wedding day. They were not just taking property. They were erasing me. That afternoon, I sat across from Mark Delaney, the lawyer Thomas had trusted for years. His office smelled of old books and quiet authority. "You don't have to accept this," Mark said gently. "The will can be challenged." "On what grounds?" I asked, exhausted. "There are irregularities," he replied. "Changes were made shortly before Thomas passed. We can argue undue influence. How long would that take?" "Months, possibly years." "And how do I live in the meantime?" Mark hesitated. "The insurance money would come through, but the medical debt could consume most of it. So I would be grieving, broke, and battling two men who felt nothing about destroying me." "They're counting on you being too tired to fight," Mark said. "That's how they win." Thomas promised I would always be safe, I thought. "What if I don't fight?" I asked. Mark looked startled. "You'd be giving up your rights permanently." "How fast could it be done?" "A week, maybe 2. I closed my eyes. Fighting would drain what little strength I had left, but surrender felt like stepping into darkness. "I'm not weak," I said quietly. I'm just tired of being treated like nothing. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The silence felt heavier than grief. I imagined courtrooms, whispers, judgments, the greedy wife, the obstacle. I made my decision. The next morning, I called Mark and told him I was ready to sign. They think I'm surrendering, I said. Let them. Grief makes people look small. It makes others careless. After the call, I walked into Thomas's office one last time. His chair was slightly turned, as if he'd only stepped away. I ran my hand along his desk, and my fingers brushed something inside a small drawer. A tiny brass key. It felt old, intentional. It didn't fit anywhere in the house. That was when I understood something crucial. Thomas had not left me empty-handed. He had left me a door. I slipped the small brass key into my coat pocket and went about my day as if nothing had changed. On the outside, I was exactly what Ryan and Lucas expected. A quiet widow packing up her life, complying without resistance. Inside, something had shifted. A question had taken root, and it refused to be ignored. The key did not belong to any lock in the house. I tried every cabinet, every drawer, every storage room. Nothing. And yet Thomas had hidden it in his desk, the one place he kept only what mattered. That alone told me it was important. Ryan called that evening. His voice was polite but impatient. "Have you spoken to Mark?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I'll sign." "Good," he said, relief barely disguised. "We'll move quickly." Lucas called the next day with the same question. Their urgency unsettled me. Thomas had never rushed decisions involving money. He believed haste created mistakes. His sons were behaving like men afraid of time. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, rolling the key between my fingers. It felt heavier than it should have. "What were you protecting me from?" I whispered. The answer came the following morning, hidden where I least expected it. I was sorting through Thomas's wallet, returned by the hospital in a sealed bag. Behind his driver's license, tucked carefully into a thin pocket, was a small card I had never seen before. First National Bank. On the back, written in Thomas's handwriting, was a single number, 379. My heart began to pound. I looked at the key in my hand. A safety deposit box. Thomas had never mentioned one, not once in 23 years. That meant he hadn't trusted anyone else with it. Not his sons, not his lawyers. Only me. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't tell Lucas. I grabbed my purse and coat and drove to the bank before doubt could stop me. The bank was quiet in the early morning, the kind of silence that made every sound echo. A woman at the counter looked up as I gave her Thomas's name and the number. "Oh," she said softly, "Mr. Hart came here often. Please follow me." She led me through a narrow hallway into a vault, lined with rows of steel boxes. The air smelled faintly of metal and cold. She stopped at one and unlocked it. "You and your husband were the only authorized names," she said. "He opened this box about 6 months ago." 6 months ago, when Thomas first became sick. She placed the box in a private room and left me alone. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were folders, letters, bank statements, photographs, everything neatly organized, as if Thomas had prepared this moment carefully. The first thing I saw was a bank statement. The account name read Hart Holdings. The balance made my breath catch. 4.7 million. A handwritten note was clipped to it. "Eleanor, this is our real savings." I moved it so the boys couldn't touch it. Tears blurred my vision. We were not broke. We were not helpless. Thomas had been protecting me all along. The next folder made my stomach drop. Emails. Ryan's name appeared again and again. The messages were cold, calculated. "Dad is getting worse," one read. "We need to move the assets before she realizes anything." Another reply followed. "Once he signs, everything transfers to the new companies. She won't understand until it's too late." They had planned this while Thomas was dying. I opened another folder and felt physically ill. Photographs showed Ryan entering casinos late at night. Lucas meeting men in dark suits. Financial records detailed massive debts, failed investments, and money quietly siphoned from clients. And then I saw it. Another will. This one was dated just weeks before Thomas died. This one left everything to me. My knees nearly gave out. They had shown me the wrong will, the earlier one, the outdated one. Thomas had changed it and hidden the proof. At the bottom of the box was an envelope with my name written in his familiar script. "Eleanor, open this last." I sat down before unfolding it. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the boys have shown you who they really are. He wrote about how Ryan and Lucas became attentive only when his health declined, how their concern felt like fear, not love, how he hired an investigator when their questions turned strange. The truth, he wrote, was worse than I imagined. Ryan was using the company as collateral for gambling debts. Lucas was moving client money into secret accounts. They aren't just greedy, Thomas wrote. They're dangerous. He explained how he moved the money into Hart Holdings, how he changed his will, and how he mortgaged the houses heavily. The properties are not gifts, he wrote. If they take them, they take the debt. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Thomas had turned their greed into a trap. The final lines broke me. I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I didn't want to put you in danger. I've given you the choice, Eleanor. Do what you believe is right. For the first time since his death, I felt something close to peace. That evening, Ryan invited me to dinner. He said it would be nice to spend time together before everything was finalized. I accepted. They sat across from me at a table set with expensive plates and forced smiles. They spoke about renovations, about selling the business. They were already spending what they believed was theirs. At one point, I mentioned the key. Ryan froze for half a second. Lucas's fork paused midair. A safety deposit box, I said lightly. Strange, isn't it? Ryan forced a smile. Dad always liked secrets. I may check it before we sign, I added. Lucas cleared his throat. That might not be necessary. Paperwork can be confusing. I smiled. Thomas always said I was smarter than people thought. They didn't laugh. As dessert was served, I realized something important. They were afraid. And fear told me I was exactly where Thomas wanted me to be. The meeting at Mark Delaney's office was scheduled for the next morning. Ryan and Lucas arrived early, their confidence restored by the belief that I was still surrendering. They sat together on one side of the long conference table, their lawyer beside them, folders neatly stacked, victory already assumed. I entered quietly. Mark looked surprised to see someone else with me. This is Victor Lane, I said calmly. He represents me. Ryan frowned. Why would you need another lawyer? We already... There has been a misunderstanding, he interrupted, leaning forward. Someone is claiming there's another will. Victor didn't react. He simply opened his briefcase and placed several documents on the table, sliding them toward Mark and their lawyer. Not claiming, Victor said evenly. Producing. The room went silent. Mark adjusted his glasses, his face draining of color as he read. These weren't in my file. That's because Thomas terminated your firm months ago, Victor replied. He was concerned about information being shared. Lucas went pale. Ryan slapped his palm on the table. This is fraud. No, Victor said. What you attempted was fraud. He turned another document around. Mortgage filings. The house carries a loan of $1.2 million, he said. The lake property carries $800,000. Ryan laughed, sharp and nervous. That's impossible. Those houses aren't worth that much. Exactly, Victor said. The debt exceeds the value. The silence became suffocating. More documents followed. Bank records, emails, photographs, evidence of gambling debts, evidence of stolen client funds. You were stealing from a dying man, Victor said. That qualifies as elder abuse. Lucas whispered, We're ruined. Not yet, Victor replied. You still have choices. Victor slid one final document toward me. This transfers ownership of the house and lake property to Ryan and Lucas, he said. Ryan's eyes lit up. Finally. I picked up the pen. You wanted everything, I said softly. I'm giving it to you. They signed without reading the fine print. Their lawyer read it instead. The properties transfer with all existing mortgages, he said slowly. The debt transfers with the title. Ryan stared at him. What debt? The full amounts, the lawyer replied. Lucas stood so fast his chair tipped backward. You said they were paid off. They weren't, Victor said. Thomas ensured that. You set us up, Ryan shouted. No, I said calmly. You set yourselves up when you tried to steal from your father. Victor folded his hands. You can accept this inheritance, walk away, or face criminal charges. Fear won. They signed. 3 months later, both properties were gone. Ryan couldn't refinance. Neither could Lucas. The bank seized everything and still pursued what remained unpaid. Ryan filed for bankruptcy. His gambling became public record. The court ordered treatment. His professional license was suspended. Lucas lost what remained of his business. Clients pressed charges. He took a night job managing shifts at an airport hotel. Their world collapsed exactly as quickly as they had tried to take mine. They tried to call me, I didn't answer. I sold the remaining shares of Thomas's investments and moved to a small coastal town where the ocean met the sky. My new home was modest, but it was mine, free of tension, free of betrayal. I planted a garden, roses, lavender, herbs. Each plant felt like proof that something new could grow after devastation. For the first time in decades, I woke without fear tightening my chest. Thomas hadn't just left me money. He left me freedom. And freedom, I learned, feels like breathing after being underwater for years. I was no longer the woman Ryan and Lucas dismissed. I was simply Eleanor. And that was enough.